a really good point, Jess. I think one of the conversations that we're about to start having with the federal government is that disabled persons organisations have to now start getting some funding to be able to talk to people in their communities about the NDIS, to build up their knowledge about the NDIS. And we're making the argument that, you know, it does have to be something dedicated and separate because everybody's swamped with just the everyday stuff in the usual advocacy or systemic work. So that certainly representation of young people is something that should be a part of that. But the other thing I wanted to say is that even prior to something like that happening, and you guys should be talking to Senator McLucas and Jenny Macklin, who's the Minister for Family Housing, Community Services and Indigenous Affairs. I'm just going to say facts here from now on, honestly. About, you know, the need for young people to have strong representative voices throughout this and for that to be funded. But beyond that, using networks as well. So there's the Youth Affairs Council here in Victoria, and obviously you'd be very engaged with them. But if there are youth affairs councils in other states that you or YDAS can reach out to and start talking to them about the NDIS, there's, you know, obviously the National Union of Students, and I'm sure there are other youth bodies that you guys would know about that I simply don't, because I don't have that connection and expertise. So thinking about some of those mainstream youth groups and how you can engage them in the NDIS is going to be really important too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Is there any final questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. It's Ariane. I just wanted to know, I haven't really had much time to read the final report. Is there anything that they've decided that they won't cover? Like that the NDIS won't cover?
Okay, it hasn't changed much in that regard from the draft report. So if you've seen some of the things in that, I think it's pretty similar. They've said that education will be mostly out. So if you're getting equipment through the NDIS that you use in other parts of your life, so such as a wheelchair or hearing aid or something like that, obviously you'll still be able to take that to school. But schools and governments are required to provide support for people with disability under the DDA.
So schools are out.
Sorry?
Schools are out.
Yeah, so schools are out. There's going to be some funny, I think there's probably going to be some funny working out about how that actually works. So employment is another one where they're not quite sure what it's going to cover and what it won't, because employers again are obliged to provide certain things already. So those are the two major areas, and obviously not so concerning for you guys, but once you get to the ripe old age of 65, you have a choice to go into aged care or stay under the NDIS, and they've left that as an either or, even though there were lots of groups like us arguing that it should be a mix so people can choose what happens to them. But those are the major things that they're leaving out.
The other big change in the final report is there was an extra chapter in there around the economic benefits of the NDIS, which, that conclusion of the Productivity Commission was that it's actually going to bring more money into the economy by having an NDIS than not having it. So I think that was a really positive addition to the final report.
Yeah, and it actually says in terms of economic benefit that really for each person who's covered by the NDIS, they'd have to recoup only $3,800 back into the economy per person each year for it to be a benefit. So that's somebody even having a part-time job that pays them money and then they pay taxes. or it's somebody not taking up a hospital bed or a
Yeah,
nursing
and
home bed.
it's something that advocacy organisations and people with disabilities have been saying for years. So it was really rewarding to see it in the final report.
Yeah.
To say that yes, this is actually not a cost, it's an investment.
And when you're talking to people outside of the disability community, I think too that would be really good to be talking about some of that economic benefit stuff in order to get people on board. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue.
One question I have is, you know how you said that education and employment is not included? What's to stop people from, say, because I understand that people will be able to have direct employment under the scheme. So what's to stop people from, say, having their employing carers who are adept at taking notes at uni, for instance, and then not using the uni services at all? Like, is there anything to prevent something like that, or?
I think that's a good question, and I think it's one of the things that they probably haven't put a lot of consideration into. There's going to be some accountability measures. So you'll have to show receipts and timesheets and things if you're hiring people yourself. But it is something that needs closer looking at. And
Just one thing that we recommended in our submission to the draft was that there's like a MOU or memorandum of understanding between different government departments so that people know where they stand on these issues. Yeah? So that education department understands, you know, what they are obliged to provide, and I think that it's about time that education has direct payments. You know, I think that around, you know, you probably have lots of issues that had that money been paid directly to you, you wouldn't have had to deal with. So hopefully we can see change throughout the whole system, not just disability funding services.
Unfortunately, the Department of Education, it's a messy field because you've got, like, I would say that the NDIS, do they want to adopt it or not for the education? Or they said that it's definitely out, or they haven't made a decision on that?
well, as I said earlier, what's in the Productivity Commission report at this stage is just recommendations. The government, through the Council of Australian Governments, are now going away and looking at all of that. And so we don't know to what extent they're going to take all of those recommendations on or not. I think it's likely, because there are other laws that say you have to get help from the Education Department, that they will leave it out, but you just never know.
The reason I ask is because my experience has been that I have carers and note takers, so carers employed through KCARES, and note takers employed through Melbourne University, where I study. But because they're governed by two different departments, and that there's no sort of talking between, I actually have to have two people with me for most of the day, like every day, while I'm at uni, and to me that seems like such a waste of resources. So to me it would make sense that either the note takers would be allowed to do personal care, or the carers are qualified to do both, essentially. So yeah, anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and you can see how many questions still remain to be looked at and worked on if you put this in terms of your own life. You know, I'm sure that some of you either have or know people who have really overprotective parents. What happens when, for instance, you have somebody who says, I want to move out of home, and their mum and dad say no, and both the family and the person with a disability are being assessed? As part of that.
Well, that's when you need an advocate. An advocate.
It seems like that
that's when you go to YDAS.
YDAS.
Can I speak to Martin, please?
It seems like there's lots of, people around the table and young people potentially in other places doing things around the NDIS, but it doesn't seem like there's necessarily visibility of that. And I wonder if there's maybe an opportunity for us to, whether it's through social media or something, create a bit of a platform where people can at least go and say to other young people, I've been to visit my MP, got a really good response, I've campaigned here, I've got this many people on board, whatever. But just to start a bit more of a conversation and maybe get, it's something we can maybe refer other people to as well. And
yeah, actually that was going to be my sort of question, like, what's your name? From AFDO?
Leah.
Leah.
Leah, I just wondered if you had any suggestions about specific ways that we might connect sort of disparate groups of young people around this issue.
That's a good question, and I think Beck's suggestion of social media is a good start. I think that it's worth perhaps also reaching out to other groups in the community that might have young people with disabilities involved with them, but they're not necessarily specialised, and saying, this is what we're doing, are any of your members interested? So just connecting with other organisations, doing some social media, just telling people what you're doing, having conversations with them and saying, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing. And sometimes just doing that is enough for someone to go, oh, I didn't know that. We'd like to link in with it. So it doesn't have to be, you can have some strategies around it. But
And there'll be more on that when Mads talks later about the national group that we're starting. So.